The Indiana Fever, congratulations, you four. You guys have successfully broken Caitlin Clark. Great job. You guys have tried your damnedest to turn her into a...
Caitlin Clark is a once-in-a-generation player, not the kind of thing people say loosely, the kind of thing you can actually prove. The same way Magic Johnson made you rethink what a point guard could be, the same way Michael Jordan made scoring look like an art form, the same way LeBron James walked into a league and immediately made it his. Caitlin Clark carries that same energy, that same gravitational pull, except she's doing it in women's basketball right now, and somehow the people closest to her are the biggest obstacle standing between her and her full potential. She is not a typical player. She never has been. From 30, sometimes 35 feet out, she can make a defense completely unravel. That's not hype. That's physics. Defenders have to sprint out to her well beyond the arc, and the second they do, the entire floor opens up. Teammates who wouldn't normally see daylight are suddenly wide open. Lanes that were locked shut are suddenly there for the taking. She doesn't just make plays happen, she makes the court reshape itself around her presence. That is a gift that cannot be coached into someone. Either you're built like that or you're not. Caitlin Clark is absolutely built like that. So why is Indiana Fever's coaching staff, Stephanie White, Kelly Krauskopf, Amber Cox, and even her own representation through Clutch Sports Group, running systems that barely use that? Post-entry sets, funneling everything into the paint while she's standing on the perimeter waiting. Caitlin Clark, someone who can crack a defense wide open without even touching the ball, being treated like a spot-up option. It's the kind of decision that makes you stop and stare. The talent is undeniable. The impact is right there. Someone just keeps choosing to look away from it.
Get rid of those four and you get rid of your stooge of an agent, Aaron Kane. You'll be free. And I know we don't want her to go the LeBron route, but at this point, you need to get rid of Aaron Kane and you need to call Rich Paul immediately.
Take a look at who Indiana Fever is actually trying to build this post-heavy system around. Monique Billings is barely cracking 10 minutes a night. 10 minutes. That's a bench contributor, not a focal point. And Aaliyah Boston, a genuinely talented, real future ahead of her, is still working on finishing through contact at the rim with any kind of reliability. She's not there yet, but even setting that aside, centering your entire offensive identity through the post while Caitlin Clark is standing on the wing doesn't just waste her, it hands every opposing defense exactly what they're hoping for. A blueprint to eliminate her without ever having to guard her. That's not a game plan, that's a gift wrapped up in a clipboard, and the post sets are only the beginning, because the rotation decisions, that's where this whole thing starts to unravel completely. 6.5 minutes, that's how long Caitlin Clark gets before she's being waved to the bench in the first quarter. 6.5 minutes. She's barely settled in, barely started reading how the defense is playing her, barely started doing the things that make her impossible to stop, and she's already sitting down. The results spoke for themselves. Portland went on a 13-2 run the second she came off the floor. The game flipped on a single substitution, and Stephanie White's response to that wasn't urgency, wasn't any kind of honest reassessment. It was an explanation that didn't hold up under the slightest scrutiny. The reasoning offered was that Aaliyah Boston is working under a minutes restriction, which is fair, that's a real situation, but then that same restriction was used to justify pulling Caitlin Clark at the exact same time. Two completely different players, two completely different circumstances, packaged together like they're the same conversation. They are not even in the same category. Here's what people don't always think about when Caitlin Clark sits down. You're not just losing her points, you're losing the entire force field she creates. Defenses that were scrambling, doubling, rotating, overextending, they breathe, they set up, they get organized. The spacing that was pulling everything apart collapses the moment she's not out there. And when she checks back in, she's not stepping into a rhythm that was maintained in her absence. She's stepping into a defense that has had time to reset, anchor in, and is no longer stressed by the threat she carries. That's not development. That's not rotation management. That's putting your best weapon down at the worst possible time and calling it strategy. Then came the Golden State explanation, and this one really lays it bare. Stephanie White said the substitution in that road game came down to not wanting Raven Johnson on the floor in a hostile environment without another ball handler beside her. Read that slowly. Caitlin Clark's floor time in a nationally televised road game was cut because the coaching staff was worried about a role player's comfort level in a loud arena. That was the reasoning. That was what they offered. But the deeper problem isn't even the one bad decision. It's what that reasoning reveals about how this organization thinks. They are choosing protection over everything else, and protection is exactly the wrong instinct when you're trying to build something real around a player like Caitlin Clark. The greats were never handled with that kind of caution. Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, they got thrown directly into the fire. Hostile crowds, elite defenses, high-stakes moments before they were ready. That pressure didn't break them, it built them. It sharpened them into exactly what they became. Keeping Caitlin Clark comfortable is not developing her, it's delaying her. It quietly signals that the organization doesn't fully believe she can handle what's coming. And what's coming? The playoff floors, the championship pressure, the arenas that will be louder and meaner than anything she's faced.
The WNBA All-Star uniforms to have the USA 250 patch should have thought that through, considering no WNBA players would have been free 250 years ago. The majority wouldn't even have had freedom 100 years ago.
Look, Caitlin Clark is literally out here saving a whole league, bringing eyeballs, bringing money, bringing people who never cared about women's basketball a day in their life. So it's wild that while she's doing all that heavy lifting, the WNBA somehow found a way to fumble the simplest thing imaginable. Every other major sports organization in the country threw on a small patch, just a patch, to mark 250 years of the nation existing. No drama, no debate, just done. The WNBA turned it into a whole situation somehow.
WNBA is planning to have its biggest stars wear a USA 250 patch during this year's All-Star game, according to multiple people familiar with the plans, joining a handful of other leagues committed to publicly commemorating the 250th anniversary of the United States. The red, white, and blue patches are unveiled earlier this year by Fanatics in partnership with President Donald Trump. The league will have the patch added to the jerseys during its All-Star game on July 25th in Chicago.
So here's the actual story. Early this year, Fanatics linked up with the Trump administration to roll out this USA 250 patch. Basically a commemorative design celebrating 250 years since the Declaration of Independence dropped. Red, white, and blue, nothing crazy on it. The NBA was in, the NFL was in, MLB, UFC, NASCAR. Everybody got on board without making it a thing. Just slapped it on and kept it moving. No political statement, no hidden agenda, just an anniversary patch. Simple. The WNBA, though, they weren't part of that original announcement back in January.
A WNBA spokesperson sent to Sportico the following statement, quote, "Like other major sports leagues, we are exploring how to best commemorate the country's 250th anniversary. Nothing has been finalized."
The second word got out about the patch, some WNBA players went straight to social media to air out their grievances. And this is exactly the kind of thing that keeps the league from growing the way it could be. Leading the noise was Indiana Fever reserve Brianna Turner. And look, if that name doesn't ring a bell, that's kind of the point. She's a bench player who doesn't see much floor time, which makes it even wilder that she's out here generating headlines for the wrong reasons instead of letting her game do the talking. Turner hopped on X and posted what might be one of the most historically short-sighted takes of the entire year. She basically said the WNBA All-Star uniform shouldn't have featured the USA 250 patch because of where things stood for people 250 years ago and even 100 years ago. Just sit with that for a second. The idea that a country's entire 250-year journey, or all the growth, all the change, all the progress, somehow doesn't deserve a 2-inch patch on a jersey is a reach that's hard to even follow. And this is the energy the WNBA is out here generating, while Caitlin Clark is literally doing everything she can to bring this league to a new level. The contrast couldn't be more obvious.
We are the most elite female athletes. 250 years ago, we would have been brothers or in working all day. Be serious right now. Yes, I know this was probably a financial decision at the end of the day.
Turner kept the train rolling though, firing off another post doubling down even harder. She went on about how as elite athletes, they would have had zero freedom 250 years ago, basically using that argument to reject the entire concept of the patch. But here's where it gets really interesting. In the same breath, she turned around and said she already knew this was probably just a money move at the end of the day. She said it herself, she knew it was business. She understood the reality of what it was, and still decided to go full theatrical about it anyway. That kind of self-awareness mixed with that kind of reaction is honestly hard to wrap your head around. And the reason this matters so much goes straight back to Caitlin Clark. Because right now, Clark is the biggest thing happening in women's basketball, arguably in women's sports period. She is the reason casual fans are buying tickets. She is the reason broadcast deals look different. She is the reason little girls are picking up basketballs. The league is riding a genuine wave right now, largely because of what she brings every single time she steps on the floor. So when the public saw these posts circulating, the backlash came quick and it came loud, because people who just discovered this league through Clark don't want to watch it burn its own momentum down over a commemorative patch that every other league in the country put on without a second thought. And that right there is exactly why people are starting to ask a question that nobody really wants to say out loud, but everybody is thinking, how long is Caitlin Clark actually going to put up with this? Because at some point enough is enough, and we might be closer to that point than the WNBA wants to admit. Think about what Clark has done for this league in an incredibly short amount of time. Before she arrived, the WNBA was surviving. It wasn't thriving, it wasn't dominating headlines, it wasn't pulling the kind of numbers that make executives lose sleep trying to figure out how to capitalize. It was just existing. And then Caitlin Clark walked in and flipped the entire table. Attendance, records that had been sitting untouched for years got shattered almost immediately. Television ratings climbed to places the league hadn't seen in over 2 decades. Her jersey became one of the best selling in the entire league overnight. Arenas that used to be half empty on a good night were suddenly sold out weeks in advance, with people on waiting lists just hoping for a chance to get in the door. That is not normal. That does not happen by accident. That is one person carrying an entire ecosystem on her back and somehow making it look effortless. So when you see drama like this patch situation unfolding, with her own teammates, players, and her own locker room on the Indiana Fever, publicly going out of their way to create controversy that reflects on the whole team, the whole league, and by extension on everything Clark is trying to build, you have to wonder how long someone with her options is going to stay patient. Because Caitlin Clark has options, real ones, options that most WNBA players could never even dream about. She is not trapped in this situation. She is choosing to be here, and that choice could change. The overseas money has always been a conversation in women's basketball. Players have been leaving to play in Europe and internationally for years because the pay structure simply made more financial sense. Clark, because of her NIL deals, her endorsements, her partnership with Nike, and her overall marketability, has more leverage than any women's basketball player in recent memory. She doesn't need the WNBA the way the WNBA needs her. That dynamic is completely flipped from what the league is used to dealing with. Typically, the league holds all the cards. With Clark, she is the card, she is the whole deck, and the league knows it, which makes it even more baffling to watch situations like this go unaddressed. Because here's the thing, the drama never seems to stop swirling around her. It started almost the moment she was drafted. There were hard fouls that looked like more than just hard fouls. There were moments on the court that raised eyebrows across the entire sports world. There were comments made, both on and off the record, by players across the league that ranged from dismissive to something that felt a lot more pointed. And through all of it, Clark kept her head down. She kept showing up, she kept performing, she kept growing her game and growing the league's audience at the same time. She absorbed all of that friction and just kept moving forward, which honestly showed a level of mental toughness that deserves more credit than it gets. But mental toughness has a ceiling, and every time the environment around her produces another moment like this, another controversy, another distraction, another situation where her teammates are out here making noise about things that push new fans away, that ceiling gets a little lower. The people who came to women's basketball because of Caitlin Clark are not the same people who were already there. They don't have years of loyalty built up to the league. They came for her specifically. They follow her specifically, and if she ever decided to step away, whether that means leaving the Fever for a different situation, taking her talents overseas for a season, or stepping back from the WNBA altogether to focus on other ventures, those fans follow her out the door. Every single one of them. The Indiana Fever specifically needs needs to be paying very close attention to what the environment around their franchise looks like right now. Clark is the reason that franchise matters on a national scale at this moment in time. She is the reason their games are broadcast on networks that weren't looking at them before. She is the reason kids in Indiana and across the entire country are wearing Fever gear. You do not let that environment get so toxic, so distracted, so consistently caught up in off-court nonsense that the person making all of that possible starts to quietly weigh her option. Organizations that make that mistake don't get second chances. By the time you realize what you had, it's already walking out the door. And the WNBA as a whole should be equally worried because the league's growth right now is not evenly distributed. It is concentrated. It is sitting almost entirely on the shoulders of one 20-something woman from Iowa who plays basketball with a joy and a skill level that makes people stop what they're doing and pay attention. There is no version of this where the WNBA continues its current growth trajectory without Caitlin Clark fully bought in and engaged. None. The math does not work. The TV deals don't hold. The sponsors don't stay. The casual fans don't stick around. All of it requires her continued presence and continued investment in this league. So every time something like this patch situation bubbles up, every time drama finds its way back into the conversation, every time the league creates an environment that makes it harder for her and easier for the noise, they are gambling with the most valuable asset women's professional basketball has ever had. And the wildest part is it doesn't have to be this way. Clark has never asked for anything except to play basketball at the highest level and compete. That's it. That's all she's ever brought to the table. And somehow that keeps getting complicated by everything happening around her. The WNBA is at a crossroads right now, whether it wants to admit it or not. It can get out of its own way, protect its momentum, and build something real around the generational talent it lucked into having. Or it can keep letting the outside noise, the internal drama, and the self-inflicted controversies chip away at the foundation until one day Caitlin Clark decides her piece is worth more than the chaos, and she finds somewhere else to be great. That day might be further away than people think, but it might also be a lot closer than the league is comfortable with, and by the time they feel it, it'll already be too late.
Yesterday's game happened, and I think everybody knows that whatever they drew up at the end of the game did not happen. Did not happen. Sophie Cunningham made an incredible read. The play wasn't great, and in the end, it is hilarious. Aaliyah Boston did a Thomas Bryant. If you guys don't remember when LeBron James hit the shot to make him the all-time leading scorer.
Caitlin Clark just put the entire league on notice. We're talking about a buzzer beater that didn't just close out a game. It announced that this version of the Indiana Fever is something different. The second that ball left her hands, you already knew it was good. There's a level of confidence Caitlin carries every time she steps on that floor, and it's not the kind you develop over time, it's the kind you showed up with. From the moment she arrived in Indiana, people questioned whether her college dominance would hold up, whether the pace of the pro game would expose her, whether the physicality of WNBA defenders would change her. Night after night, game winner after game winner, she answers every single one of those questions without opening her mouth. This isn't a rookie still figuring things out. This is a player who walked into the league and immediately started rewriting what the WNBA looks like to the rest of the world. Arenas are selling out. Ratings are at record highs. The conversation around women's basketball has never taken up this much space in the culture. And standing right at the center of all of that is number 22, pulling up from distances that most professionals wouldn't even practice from. None of what she does out there is accidental. That's preparation colliding with pressure, and Caitlin Clark doesn't shrink in pressure. She gravitates toward it. The bigger the moment, the sharper she gets. That's what separates truly generational players from everyone else, and Indiana is watching one do it in real time. But here's where it gets really interesting, because what followed that final buzzer wasn't your typical post-game celebration. There's a clear difference between a team celebrating a basketball win and a team actively putting something on display. What went down after that shot hit completely different. Players weren't just going through the normal winning motions, there was a purpose to it. The energy in that moment extended well past the relief of getting a W in the standings. When you actually pay attention, to the body language, to who was gravitating toward who, to the intensity behind those reactions. This wasn't just a group of women celebrating a hard-fought victory. This was a group of women communicating something to anyone paying close enough attention. In the WNBA, so much of the real messaging happens away from the actual game. It happens on social media, in sideline interactions, in the way players choose to publicly show up for each other when the cameras are still rolling. Moments like this carry weight that goes far beyond the final score. And if you've been following this Indiana Fever situation closely, you already know exactly what that weight is connected to. And that brings us to the question that the entire basketball community is now sitting with. Did we just watch the Indiana Fever locker room draw a line in the sand against their own coaching staff? Because that's what people are saying. That's the conversation flooding every comment section, every sports forum, every group chat full of WNBA fans right now. This isn't just drama for the sake of drama. When players on a professional roster start visibly rallying around each other in ways that seem pointed and intentional, that usually means something is brewing beneath the surface that the front office and coaching staff can't ignore. The relationship between a locker room and its coaches is one of the most fragile dynamics in all of professional sports. And when Caitlin Clark is involved, when she's the gravitational center of everything happening with this franchise, every single move gets amplified tenfold. What might be a minor internal tension on any other team becomes a national storyline when your most important player is the most talked about athlete in women's sports. That's the reality Indiana is navigating right now, and it is anything but simple.
A lot of people are taking the fact that they went rogue as almost like dissent against the coaches, dissent against the organization, that the players are turning on the coaches, the players aren't playing for Steph anymore, and this could be not further from the truth, or there could be truth into it. And I'll explain the two different situations, because there is nuance to this. There is absolutely some nuance to this entire conversation.
Let's get into exactly why this particular moment matters as much as it does. At the end of regulation against the Dallas Wings, the Indiana Fever had a play drawn up. The coaching staff had a specific design, a specific intention, and a specific player they wanted the ball going to in that moment. That's how professional basketball works. You get a timeout, you diagram something out, and every person on that floor is supposed to execute their assignment. That's the structure. That's the expectation. Except that's not what happened. Sophie Cunningham looked at the situation unfolding in front of her and made a split-second decision to completely abandon the design play and go with what she was reading on the floor. And that improvised, off-script, against the game plan decision is the one that ended up working. The shot went up, the moment landed, and suddenly, Sophie Cunningham wasn't a player who went rogue. She was a hero. The kind of hero that gets mobbed by her teammates. The kind of hero that gets her moment plastered all over social media within minutes. What's significant here isn't just that it worked. It's that nobody on that roster even flinched at the fact that the design play got thrown out the window. Nobody looked toward the bench with hesitation. Nobody seemed concerned about what the coaching staff's reaction was going to be. The celebration was immediate, genuine, and completely unfiltered. And Caitlin Clark was right in the middle of all of it, matching that energy like she'd been waiting for exactly this kind of moment to unfold. That's not nothing. When the face of your franchise is that visibly locked in with a teammate who just went against the coach's call, that speaks to something deeper about the culture that's developing inside that locker room. Because here's what people keep glossing over when they talk about Caitlin Clark's impact on this team. It isn't just about her stat line. It's about the gravity she creates around everyone else. When a player of her caliber fully embraces a moment like what Sophie Cunningham just gave them, it sends a message to every other player on that roster. It says, your instincts are trusted here. It says this team runs on feel just as much as it runs on scheme. And when that message is being co-signed by the player who is quite literally putting this franchise on the map right now, it carries enormous weight in that locker room. The social media piece is also not something to wave off as just players being players online. In today's WNBA, social media is part of the game. It's where narratives get built. where fan bases rally, and where players communicate things that might be too pointed to say directly in a post-game press conference. When the entire roster turns Sophie's moment into a coordinated celebration online, that's intentional. That's a statement dressed up as enthusiasm. And the fact that it's all swirling around a team where Caitlin Clark is the undeniable center of attention means every layer of it gets examined under a microscope. Now here's where it gets complicated, because not everything is as straightforward as it looks on the surface. And anyone telling you this is a simple situation either hasn't thought it through or isn't being honest with you. There are genuinely two separate ways to look at what happened here, and both of them carry real merit depending on where you're standing.
I'm putting it out there right now. Not one player dislikes Stephanie White personally that is currently on this team. I can be almost certain of that. I can say that with 99% certainty. But again, I don't know if they dislike Chrissy Zides personally. She was the bad coach. And again, anyone who's been on a team knows sometimes you can like your coach and you can just... Sometimes you can like your coach as a person and you can just never want to play for them again. I've had plenty of coaches like that through my life where I'm like, I genuinely, like, I have nothing as a person, I just can't play for them anymore.
Before we go any further down this road, we need to pump the brakes and lay out some ground truth. Because without the proper foundation, this whole conversation becomes just another hot take that doesn't actually serve anybody. So let's establish what we actually know versus what people are spinning. First and most importantly, Stephanie White is not someone that the players on this roster have a personal problem with. That's not really up for debate. From everything that's come out publicly and from every read you can get on the internal dynamics of this team, the issue, if there even is one, is not about Stephanie White, the human being. It's not about her character. It's not about whether she treats people with respect in the building. By virtually all accounts, she does. And that distinction matters enormously, because the internet has a way of flattening these situations into villain narratives, and that's not what this is. Nobody is out here saying Stephanie White is a bad person. Nobody on that roster is walking into practice with animosity toward their head coach on a personal level. That's almost certainly not what's happening, and it would be irresponsible to frame it that way. What is more complicated, and what anyone who has actually played competitive sports at any meaningful level already understands from lived experience, is that you can deeply respect someone as a human being while simultaneously having real frustrations with them as a coach. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. They exist together all the time. In professional sports locker rooms, and pretending otherwise is just naive. A player can genuinely like their coach, enjoy their presence in the building, appreciate the way they communicate on a personal level, and still feel like the system isn't working, still feel like the rotations aren't right, still feel like the play calling in critical moments isn't putting the team in the best position to win. That tension is one of the oldest stories in sports, and it plays out on every level, from high school gyms to NBA arenas to WNBA courts. And when you're talking about a locker room that includes Caitlin Clark, a player who came into this league with an almost supernatural understanding of the game, a player who has seen what winning basketball looks like and knows what it feels like to operate within a system built specifically around her strengths, that tension has the potential to be amplified in ways that most coaching situations never have to deal with. Caitlin Clark is not just another talented player pushing back against a coach's system. She is the reason this franchise is relevant in a way it has never been before. She is the reason people are tuning in. She is the reason tickets are selling and cameras are showing up, and the national conversation keeps circling back to Indianapolis. That reality changes the power dynamic in ways that are genuinely unprecedented for a team like Indiana. And Stephanie White is navigating that whether she signed up for it or not. So when we're talking about friction, real or perceived, between this locker room and the coaching staff, we have to hold all of that context at the same time. It's not personal, but it is real. And the difference between those two things is exactly where this story lives.
We don't know what exactly the type of coach Stephanie White is because we're not behind closed doors. If Stephanie White is a coach that encourages players to that is going to encourage players to make reads, even if it's against the set play, which I don't believe she is. But again, I don't know this because I'm only judging based on what we've seen publicly. Then this isn't going to cause anything. If it turns out that Stephanie White's one of those coaches that's like, it's my way or no way. And people are saying, oh, Austin Kelly drew it up. Yes, but like, who hired Austin Kelly and gave him that like role? That's Stephanie White okaying it all. If it's a coach's way or no way, and there's tons of coaches like that, by the way. There's tons of good coaches that are like that.
Here's where the conversation shifts into territory that a lot of people aren't equipped to have, because this isn't just about one broken play or one viral celebration. This goes straight to the heart of coaching philosophy. And there are genuinely two schools of thought in basketball that have both produced championships and both produced disasters depending on execution. There is a very real and very legitimate style of coaching that operates on total system commitment. No freelancing, no improvisation, no individual reads that deviate from the called play, regardless of what the defense is giving you. The coach sees the game from a higher vantage point, designs the system with all 5 players in mind, and demands that every single person on the floor trusts that structure completely, even when their instincts are screaming something different at them in the moment. And the reason that philosophy exists isn't because those coaches are control freaks or because they don't trust their players' basketball IQ. The reason it exists is actually deeply logical when you break it down. There's a story that circulates in basketball circles about a coach at a preseason camp who pulled a player aside after he made a decision mid-play that was technically the right basketball read. The defense gave him something and he took it, but it wasn't what was called. And the coach sat him down and walked him through exactly why that was still a problem. He told that player that he understood the decision made sense in isolation. He told him the read was good. But then he explained that the moment one player starts operating on their own instincts instead of the called play, the other 4 people on the floor are running something completely different. They're executing the actual design. They're setting screens for a play that's no longer happening. They're cutting to spaces that are now occupied. The whole system breaks down, not because one person made a bad decision, but because one person made a different decision. And that's the distinction that separates system basketball from instinct basketball at the highest level. That philosophy has a championship pedigree you cannot argue with. Greg Popovich built one of the most decorated dynasties in NBA history on exactly that foundation. The San Antonio system was so deeply ingrained that players who came from completely different backgrounds and completely different styles of play transformed themselves to fit it. And they won because of it. Phil Jackson's triangle offense operated on the same principle. The triangle only works when all 5 players are reading the same cues, making the same movements, and trusting them, geometry of the system, over their own individual instincts. It's not a coincidence that both of those coaches are considered among the greatest to ever do it. The system works, but only under one very specific condition. Players have to genuinely believe at a core level that what the coach is drawing up is more valuable than what their own eyes are telling them in the moment. That belief has to be total. It cannot be halfway. The second a player starts privately questioning whether the system is actually better than their read, the whole thing starts to crack. And the longer that crack goes unaddressed, the wider it gets. That's exactly what makes what we just watched in Indiana so telling. Because when Sophie Cunningham abandoned the designed play and the entire roster responded the way they did, with that immediate, enthusiastic, publicly displayed celebration, what they were really showing the world is that the belief in the system isn't there right now. Not fully. Maybe not even close to fully. And with Caitlin Clark leading that charge in energy and visibility, the message landed louder than anyone in that coaching staff probably wanted it to. She is too prominent, too watched, and too central to this franchise's identity for her reaction in that moment to go unanalyzed. When the most important player on your roster is that visibly energized by a teammate going off script, it raises a question that Stephanie White and her entire staff are going to have to answer, not for the media, but for themselves.
He was like, look, I know, I was trying to explain. I was like, look, what you did was right, but that's not the point. He's like, it's literally, if people just start going rogue and making reads, the offense that he wanted to run didn't work. And it was like, it's as long as everybody is making reads, it's like, if you do this, then 4 other people have to be on the same page, and that's not the case. There are coaches that have different philosophies. There are really good coaches that are different philosophies. Again, I play some unbelievable coaches that have the philosophy of it's my way or no way.
Now put yourself in Stephanie White's shoes for a second, because her situation is genuinely one of the more complicated positions any coach in the WNBA has been in recently, and it doesn't get nearly enough nuanced discussion. She didn't walk into Indiana with some cold, authoritarian reputation. That's not who she is, and that's not how she was received when she took this job. Stephanie White built her name in this league as someone players want to play for, someone who invests in relationships, someone who makes players feel seen as human beings first and athletes second. That relational quality is real, it's documented, and it's genuinely why people around the league have respected her as a coach. She has a warmth to her coaching identity that a lot of people in her position simply don't have. And that's not a small thing when you're trying to build trust inside a professional locker room. But here's where the complexity lives. Because Stephanie White also came into Indiana with a vision, a structured offensive vision. A system that has specific rules, specific spacing principles, specific reads that she wants executed the way she diagrams them. And on paper, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Having a defined offensive identity is what separates organized professional basketball from 5 people just improvising on a court together. The problem isn't that she has a system. The problem is what happens when that system meets real game results and the numbers don't cooperate. Because you can sell a roster on a philosophy when things are clicking. You can ask players to trust the process when the process is visibly working. But when the results start coming back underwhelming, and the statistics start telling a story that contradicts the vision, that's when even the most loyal players start having quiet conversations they wouldn't have otherwise. And the results right now are genuinely hard to defend. The Indiana Fever are sitting 9th in offensive rating across the league. 9th. Let that marinate for a second, because that number doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in the context of who is actually on this roster. You have Caitlin Clark running the point. Caitlin Clark, the player who single-handedly shifted the cultural footprint of women's basketball, who averaged numbers in college that nobody had ever seen before, who came into the WNBA and immediately proved that her game translated. You have Aaliyah Boston operating in the paint, one of the most fundamentally sound and versatile big players in the league. You have Kelsey Mitchell giving you secondary scoring punch that most teams in this league would build their offense around if she was their best option. That is not a 9th place offensive talent level. That is nowhere close to a 9th place offensive talent level. That's a top 3, top 4 conversation waiting to happen if everything is functioning the way it should be. When that kind of gap opens up between the talent on paper and the production on the floor, there is only one place the questions eventually land, and that's on the system and the people designing it. Players at this level are sophisticated. Caitlin Clark is one of the most basketball-intelligent players the sport has ever produced. She sees the floor at a level that very few people in the history of the game have been able to match. When someone with that kind of vision is operating inside a structure that's producing 9th place offensive efficiency, you better believe she feels it every single possession. She knows when a play design is putting her in a worse position than where her instincts would take her. She knows when the spacing is off. She knows when the reads being called from the sideline aren't matching what the defense is actually giving. And the more that disconnect persists, the harder it becomes for any player, let alone the most watched player in women's sports, to fully commit to the called play over what her own eyes are telling her. That erosion of trust in the system isn't a character flaw. It's a natural human response to evidence. And right now, the evidence is sitting at 9th place.
Caitlin Clark, I'd say, is not expecting to be subbed out of this possession. At this stage, Caitlin Clark is locking in, thinking, fuck this, I gotta get a stop. Like, she didn't miss a high five. Like, I don't think there's anything in this. People are looking too far into this. But from a team perspective, in one of the high points of the season, if all of a sudden it turns out that the Indiana Fever or the coaches and the coaching staff are upset that they made a game-winning play, that's when you can lose a locker room.
Here's the part of this story that should have Indiana's front office genuinely losing sleep, and it connects directly back to Caitlin Clark, because everything with this franchise connects back to Caitlin Clark at this point. That's just the reality of what she's built here. But buried underneath all the highlight plays and the record-breaking moments and the sold-out arenas is a detail that reveals something deeply uncomfortable about how this team is being managed. Justin Pard has not played a single minute this season. Not one. Zero. And before you shrug that off as a roster decision that doesn't involve Caitlin Clark, think about what it means for the environment she has to compete in every single day. Caitlin Clark did not come to Indiana to be part of a poorly managed situation. She came here to win. She came here to build something. She came here because this was the opportunity in front of her, and from day one, she poured everything she had into making this franchise matter on a national level. And she succeeded at that in ways that exceeded even the most optimistic projections. Arenas that used to be half full are now packed. Broadcasts that used to be afterthoughts are now appointment television. The Indiana Fever went from a franchise people acknowledged existed to a franchise people genuinely follow, debate, and invest in emotionally. Caitlin Clark did that. She carried that on her back, and she made it look natural. So when the organizations surrounding her start showing signs of dysfunction, real, documented, statistically supported dysfunction, it reflects on her in a way that isn't fair, but is absolutely unavoidable. She is the face. When the face is attached to a body that isn't functioning right, people notice. And Caitlin Clark notices most of all. Development contracts in the WNBA are not guaranteed playing time situations. Everybody understands that. When you sign a player to that kind of deal, the expectation on both sides is that minutes are earned, not handed over. But here's what makes this particular situation impossible to explain away with standard roster logic. Every single other player currently on a development contract in this league has gotten on the floor at some point this season. Every one of them. Even in the lowest leverage situations, even in blowouts where the game was decided before halftime, those players have seen real minutes. Because that's what the contract is literally designed to produce. You bring someone in on a development deal because you want to evaluate them under live game conditions. You want to see how they handle real pressure. You want to give them something to grow with. That's not a favor. That's the entire point of the structure. So when one specific player under that contract type hasn't gotten a single second of floor time, while every comparable player around the league has gotten something, that stops being a basketball decision and starts being something else entirely. And Caitlin Clark, who sees everything that happens inside that organization with a level of awareness that most people underestimate, is not blind to that. This is a woman who tracked every single statistical inefficiency in the Fever's offensive system, and felt every one of them in her body on the court. You think she doesn't notice when a teammate who deserves an opportunity isn't getting one in a way that defies every established pattern? Caitlin Clark is one of the most detail-oriented, competitive minds in the sport right now. The small things don't escape her attention. They fuel her. They inform how she understands her environment. And when the environment starts showing cracks, real cracks, not manufactured drama, she feels those cracks differently than anyone else on the roster because she has more invested in this franchise turning into something special than anyone else wearing that uniform. That's what makes the Justin Pard situation matter beyond just the roster management conversation. It's a signal. It's the kind of signal that a player like Caitlin Clark picks up on and files away somewhere in her competitive brain. Players talk within that locker room. They see who's getting opportunities and who isn't. They form quiet opinions about how decisions are being made and whether those decisions are actually in service of the team winning or whether something else is driving them. And in a locker room where Caitlin Clark has become the undeniable heartbeat, where her energy sets the temperature for everything else, those quiet opinions don't stay quiet indefinitely. She doesn't have to say a word publicly for her perspective to be felt by every person in that building. Her presence alone amplifies everything. The front office built this entire franchise identity around what Caitlin Clark represents. And right now, the operational decisions being made around her are not matching the magnitude of what she's given this organization. That disconnect is not sustainable. And somebody in Indianapolis needs to recognize that before it becomes a much bigger story than it already is.
A player or coach or whatever, I want to see, hear, and feel that culture. And so I think about sometimes culture is kind of like you have to plant it, you have to grow it, and you have to maintain it. And it's a little bit like a garden, sometimes you have to weed it. You may have some problems with some weeds taking over your culture and you have to plop them out.
There's something circulating right now that deserves way more attention than it's getting. Lynn Dunn, senior advisor for the Indiana Fever, a woman whose fingerprints are all over the foundation of women's basketball as we know it, sat down in front of a panel audience and started dropping what sounded like leadership wisdom, but make no mistake about what this was really about. This was about Caitlin Clark. Everything happening in Indiana right now circles back to Caitlin Clark, and the sooner people accept that, the clearer this whole situation becomes. Lynn Dunn sitting up there talking about culture, about what makes a team function, about how organizations have to protect themselves from the inside out. And then she lands on this whole thing about removing pieces that don't fit, about how sometimes the most important decision a caretaker can make is knowing when something needs to go before the damage spreads past the point of fixing. She never said Caitlin Clark's name. She didn't have to. Now, if someone played that clip for you with zero context, you might nod along and keep scrolling. Coaches say stuff like that all the time. Veteran front office minds love a good metaphor, love wrapping sharp opinions inside language that sounds philosophical enough to avoid direct accountability. That's a whole art form in professional sports. But here's the thing, context doesn't just matter here. Context is literally the entire story, because Caitlin Clark isn't some rotational piece they're quietly phasing out. Caitlin Clark is the reason the Indiana Fever are relevant in conversations happening way outside the usual WNBA bubble. She is the product. She is the draw. She is the reason cameras show up, the reason opposing arenas sell out when Indiana comes to town, the reason this franchise went from an afterthought to a talking point overnight. So when Lynn Dunn starts philosophizing about removal on a public panel, the only person that framing could possibly apply to at this scale is Caitlin Clark. What's been building in Indiana isn't organic drama. It's not locker room gossip that accidentally found its way out into the open. This is architecture. This is a structured, deliberate narrative being assembled piece by piece in real time, out in the open. Then Caitlin Clark is the one it's being built around. Somebody drew up a plan, and right now you're watching it get constructed brick by brick, using language that gives everyone involved just enough plausible deniability to act caught off guard when the move finally lands. The metaphors are intentional. intentional. The timing of Lynn Dunn appearing on panels to talk about this right now is intentional. Every word is a breadcrumb pointing straight at Caitlin Clark, laid out carefully enough that when the actual announcement drops, the audience has already been conditioned to receive it. And that's what makes this so uncomfortable to sit with, because Caitlin Clark hasn't done anything to deserve being the subject of a quiet smear campaign dressed up in coaching philosophy. What Caitlin Clark has done is show up and completely transform the financial and cultural reality of a league that spent decades fighting for the bare minimum of mainstream attention. A regular season game, not a playoff game, not a rivalry matchup with stakes attached, a completely ordinary game on a Wednesday night schedule. Pulled over 3 million viewers because Caitlin Clark was the one lacing up. 3 million people for a regular season WNBA game. The kind of number that makes network executives rethink entire broadcast strategies. The kind of number that changes what a franchise is actually worth in a negotiating room. Caitlin Clark did that. Not a marketing campaign, not a rebrand, not some executive's master plan. Caitlin Clark walked into this league and single-handedly shifted what was possible here. Ticket demand around her games, merchandise attached to her name, the way completely casual sports fans who never gave women's basketball a second look suddenly started setting reminders. All of that traces directly back to Caitlin Clark, and the ripple she created isn't done moving. It's still expanding, which means whatever Indiana is building toward right now, whatever this slow and calculated campaign eventually turns into, the fallout won't just land on one franchise. If they move Caitlin Clark, if they actually pull that trigger, the entire league feels it. Every front office, every broadcast deal, every conversation about where the WNBA goes from here, all of it gets complicated the moment Caitlin Clark isn't where the audience expects her to be.
Cut a player because they don't fit into your culture that you've created, and it all goes back to behavior.
It all goes back to behavior. The toughest thing is when you got to trade a player, cut a player, and it all goes back to behavior. What did Dan Dockich say about Caitlin Clark? Oh, she's a DICK. Stop being a DICK. That is what he had to say. He was talking about beyond.
Pay close attention to the specific language Lynn Dunn chose to use up on that panel, because word choice at this level is never accidental. She didn't talk about performance. She didn't talk about production. She didn't stand up there and make a case about statistics being the problem. She made it about behavior, about culture fit, about the idea that a player can be doing everything right on the court and still be the wrong person for the room. And that framing is doing a lot of heavy lifting right now because it conveniently sidesteps everything Caitlin Clark actually accomplished last season. The 19 points per game, the 8 assists per game as a rookie in a league full of veterans who've been running these systems for years. None of that gets addressed. None of that gets challenged because it can't be. The numbers are untouchable. So instead, the conversation gets steered somewhere the numbers can't follow. It gets steered toward behavior, toward culture, toward the kinds of accusations that are specifically designed to be impossible to disprove. And then, 3 days before Lynn Dunn even sat down on that panel, Dan Dockich went on a podcast and started going in on Caitlin Clark. Not her shooting percentage, not her defensive positioning, her personality. He called her difficult, said she's a problem in that locker room, went after the way she interacts with referees, the way she carries herself, questioned her shot selection as if that was somehow a character flaw rather than a basketball decision that every elite scorer in the history of the sport has had argued about them at some point. He even reached for a word, starting with the letter D, and it wasn't difficult. That was specifically chosen to undercut her in a way that had nothing to do with basketball. Nothing. That was personal. That was deliberate, and that was the first brick in the wall. Now think about the timing of that. Really sit with it. Dan Dockich goes on a podcast and takes shots at Caitlin Clark's character. 3 days later, Lynn Dunn, the senior advisor of the franchise Caitlin Clark plays for, is on a public panel talking about how sometimes you have to let a player go because they don't fit the culture, and it comes down to behavior, not ability, behavior. You want to tell me those two things happening in the same week, aimed at the same person, using the exact same framing, is a coincidence? That's not a coincidence. That's a rollout. That's two parts of the same message being delivered through two different messengers so that neither one of them has to carry the full weight of what's actually being said. This is what a coordinated narrative looks like when it's still in the early stages. They're not ready to make the move yet, so instead they're running the pre-campaign, softening the audience, getting people used to the idea that maybe, just maybe, Caitlin Clark is the problem. That maybe the issue in Indiana isn't the front office decisions, or the roster construction, or the coaching situation. Maybe the issue is the biggest star they've ever had, and the way she conducts herself. And if enough voices start echoing that same theme, it starts to feel like consensus. It starts to feel like something everyone already knew, but nobody was saying out loud. That's how you prepare a fan base for a move that would otherwise feel incomprehensible. But here's the part that truly exposes what this is actually about. All of this started, the podcasts, the panel appearances, the loaded metaphors, all of it, the moment Caitlin Clark stopped staying silent and started standing up for herself. The moment she stopped absorbing everything being thrown at her with a smile and pushed back. And apparently, somewhere in that Indiana front office, that wasn't the response they were expecting from her. Because the second she showed she wasn't going to be managed quietly, the entire machinery kicked into gear.
Yeah, I hear the Fever are sick of Caitlin Clark. Y'all hearing that too? It's not coming out of nowhere. So think about this. Lynn Dunn joins this panel, right? That nobody even knows where this channel is for real. She joins this panel and is talking about getting rid of a player amid in behavioral issues and things like that. The Indiana Fever aren't built for Caitlin.
And then it got louder, because it wasn't just Lynn Dunn on a panel and Dan DeKeach on a podcast anymore. The circle started expanding, and that expansion is exactly what tells you this thing has real organizational backing behind it. Michael Thompson, NBA champion, father of Klay Thompson, a man whose entire professional footprint lives inside the men's game, jumped on his radio show and started talking about Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever. Not because someone asked him to break down her pick and roll execution. Not because someone pitched him a segment about rookie development in the WNBA. He came with it unprompted, and he came with specifics. Said he's hearing from multiple people inside that organization that the Fever are done, not frustrated, not in a rough patch, done. That the relationship between Caitlin Clark and that front office has deteriorated past the point where anyone inside believes it can be repaired. That Stephanie White's system and the way Caitlin Clark plays basketball are fundamentally incompatible, and that Indiana has already started thinking about what life looks like on the other side of that. Now let's slow down on who Michael Thompson is in this context, because that part matters just as much as what he actually said. This is not a WNBA insider. This is not a beat reporter who has been covering the Fever for 3 seasons, building sources, attending practices, tracking the temperature of the locker room over time. Michael Thompson does not live in that world. He dips into women's basketball occasionally, the way a lot of NBA adjacent voices do, when something is big enough to cross over into their lane. So for him to come out with this level of detail, with multiple sources cited, with specific language about the relationship being broken and the system not fitting, that didn't happen because he went digging. That happened because someone handed it to him. Someone with a direct line to what's happening inside that Indiana organization picked up the phone, or had a conversation at the right event, or made sure the right information found its way to someone with a platform big enough to amplify it. This is a leak that was designed to look like reporting, and that's what separates this from normal sports drama. When a situation is genuinely messy but unintentional, information comes out in fragments. It's contradictory. Different people tell different versions. The timeline is scattered. This doesn't look like that at all. This looks like a coordinated information release. Dan DeKeach goes first with the character framing, the behavior, the attitude, the way she carries herself in spaces the public can't see. Then Lynn Dunn follows with the philosophical justification. Sometimes culture fit is more important than what someone does on the court. And then Michael Thompson comes in carrying the sourced confirmation. Multiple people inside the building. The relationship is broken. They want out. That is a 3-part message. Introduction, context, confirmation, delivered across different platforms, through different voices, spaced out just enough to feel organic while actually functioning like a press release. And here's the part that should genuinely disturb anyone paying attention. This entire infrastructure is being built specifically to make trading Caitlin Clark feel survivable to the public, because the people running this know exactly what they're sitting on. They know that Caitlin Clark isn't just a good basketball player who draws a solid crowd. She is the single most transformative figure this league has seen in a generation. They know what the numbers look like. They know what the arenas look like when she walks into them. They know what their own franchise looked like before she got there versus what it looks like now. So they also know that if they move her without any groundwork laid, the backlash doesn't just come from fans online. It comes from sponsors, it comes from broadcast partners, it comes from the league office, it comes from every corner of the sports world that has been pointing at Caitlin Clark as proof that the WNBA's moment has finally arrived. The only way to survive that reaction is to get ahead of it, to spend weeks building a story where Indiana tried everything, gave it every chance, but ultimately the culture just wasn't salvageable, to make it sound like they had no other option. That's what all of this is. It's not tea, it's not drama, it's damage control being written in advance, and Caitlin Clark is the one being set up to take the blame for a decision that was made in a conference room without her.
I don't think this is a coincidence that you got Michael Thompson saying what he's saying, you got Lynn Dunn saying what she's saying, you got Corey Close, who might be done and tired of the college recruiting in NIL. She might be looking for a WNBA job, and it might come with the LA Sparks when Caitlin Clark arrives.
Now there's another name that needs to be added to this picture, because this thing keeps growing the more you look at it. Corey Close, head coach at UCLA, national championship on her resume, and someone who has worked directly with Caitlin Clark during USA basketball summers, recently sat down on a panel and started dissecting Caitlin Clark's game in a very particular way. She got into the defensive side of Clark's play. She talked about how Clark's confidence, which everyone acknowledges is one of the core reasons she's as good as she is, can occasionally tip over into a liability when she leans on it in situations that don't call for it. And she packaged all of this in the kind of measured, analytical tone that makes it easy to receive as objective basketball evaluation from someone with real credentials. On paper, that's exactly what it looks like. A respected coach who has been in elite spaces for a long time, offering a nuanced take on a player she's had direct experience with. Nothing inflammatory, nothing you could easily push back against. But pull the camera back a little bit and everything about that panel appearance starts to look different, because Corey Close isn't operating in a vacuum right now. College basketball in the NIL era has fundamentally restructured itself around money and movement in ways that have made life genuinely difficult for coaches who came up learning a completely different version of the game. The recruiting landscape has shifted so dramatically that coaches who built their entire identity around development, around long-term relationships, around the traditional model of building a program from the ground up, a lot of them are quietly looking around and wondering whether the college game still fits them the way it used to. And the word that's been floating around people close to Corey Close is that she might be one of those coaches, that the WNBA, with its different structure and its professional environment, might be exactly the kind of space she's been eyeing, which means that panel appearance, that careful and credentialed breakdown of Caitlin Clark's tendencies and limitations, wasn't just analysis, it was positioning. And here's where Caitlin Clark becomes the center of this specific chess move too, because if Indiana actually follows through on what every piece of this campaign has been pointing toward, the conversation about where Caitlin Clark lands next isn't complicated. The Los Angeles Sparks make too much sense to ignore. The cap flexibility is there, the draft assets are there. The desperation for relevance in the second largest media market in the country is absolutely there. The Sparks have been invisible in the broader sports conversation for years now, and every executive in that building knows it. Caitlin Clark arriving in Los Angeles doesn't just fix that, it fixes it immediately, completely, and with the kind of national attention that no rebuild strategy or draft lottery hope could ever manufacture. She would make the Sparks matter overnight in a city full of professional sports franchises competing for the same shrinking pool of casual fan attention. So now look at what Corey Close did through that lens. She went on a panel and demonstrated publicly and on record that she understands Caitlin Clark's game deeply enough to identify its edges, that she's not intimidated by the magnitude of who Caitlin Clark is right now, that she has the professional history with her to build something real, and the coaching intelligence to address the areas where Caitlin Clark hasn't yet reached her ceiling. That is not a basketball breakdown, that is a resume submission. That is a coach telling every front office with ears, and specifically the one in Los Angeles, that she is the person who can step in, manage the personality, develop the weaknesses, and unlock whatever version of Caitlin Clark the world hasn't fully seen yet. It's calculated, it's professionally savvy, and in the context of everything else swirling around Caitlin Clark right now, it fits into this broader pattern with uncomfortable precision, because that's what's so striking about all of this when you lay it out flat. Every single person who has publicly weighed in on Caitlin Clark over the past few weeks has had some kind of angle running underneath the surface. Not one of these voices is purely disinterested. Dan Dakich needed the attention. Lynn Dunn is protecting the organizational narrative. Michael Thompson was handed information someone wanted distributed. And Corey Close is lobbying for a job that doesn't exist yet but might very soon, and with Caitlin Clark as the centerpiece of the opportunity. And none of them are saying Caitlin Clark's name with anything resembling honesty about what their real motivation is. They're all using her, all building something off of her name and her profile, while simultaneously framing her as the problem. That's the part that needs to be said out loud. Caitlin Clark is being used as a tool by every single person in this conversation, while being publicly positioned as the liability. If that doesn't tell you everything about how this league and the people orbiting it actually operate, nothing will.
Man, Lynn Dunn can't stop. Lynn Dunn is out in the public planting the seeds that she's trading Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark 100% will get traded away from the Indiana Fever before Stephanie White gets moved. That is what Lynn Dunn is going out and doing. Lynn Dunn did an interview where she joined a panel, and my, oh my, this is big news.
Here's what nobody in that Indiana front office has actually thought all the way through. Caitlin Clark is not a commodity that gets quietly reassigned and then fades into whatever new market absorbs her. She doesn't work that way. The audience she built doesn't work that way. The people who started watching women's basketball for the first time in their lives because of her aren't attached to a franchise or a jersey color. They're attached to her specifically. They follow Caitlin Clark the way people followed players before the era of corporate brand loyalty took over sports entirely. That kind of connection is personal, it's direct, and it travels. So every calculation Indiana thinks they're making right now has a variable in it that their spreadsheets aren't accounting for. What happens to Fever ticket sales the morning after a trade gets announced? What happens to their local broadcast numbers, their merchandise revenue, the energy in that building on a Tuesday night when the team they spent 3 weeks constructing a narrative around is suddenly running a different point guard out there? Those aren't hypothetical questions with comfortable answers. Those are the actual consequences sitting on the other side of this decision, and the people engineering this campaign have been so focused on making the move feel justifiable that they haven't spent nearly enough time thinking about what Indiana looks like on the other side of it. And Caitlin Clark hasn't said a word publicly about any of this. Not one word. She hasn't addressed the podcast comments. She hasn't responded to the panel appearances. She hasn't put anything on social media that acknowledges this entire structure being built around her name. And that silence is being misread by the people running this campaign as passivity, as someone who can be managed, as a situation that can be controlled. But anyone who has watched Caitlin Clark for more than 20 minutes on the court, in interviews, in the competitive environments she's been thriving in since she was a teenager, knows that her silence is never really silence. It's patience. It's someone who understands that the most powerful response to a coordinated attack is to let the people running it fully expose themselves before you say anything at all. Because the thing about campaigns like this one is that they only work if the target cooperates with the framing. If Caitlin Clark reacts emotionally, they point to the reaction as proof of the behavior problem they invented. If she responds publicly, they use her words to fuel the next phase of the rollout. The only move that actually disrupts it is the one she appears to be making, which is to exist, to perform, to continue being the person those 3 million viewers showed up to watch, and to let everyone who built this thing carry the weight of what they built when it eventually collapses under its own contradictions. And it will collapse. Because the foundation of this entire narrative is the idea that Caitlin Clark is somehow a problem that needs to be solved, and that premise falls apart the moment you measure it against anything real, against the attendance numbers, against the broadcast ratings, against the sponsorship conversations that are happening at a completely different level than they were 2 years ago, against the simple observable fact that every arena she walks into, home or away, treats it like an event. You cannot build a sustainable case that someone is a cultural cancer when the culture around them is visibly, measurably, undeniably thriving because of their presence. The numbers don't lie in the direction this campaign needs them to lie, and eventually the people with real financial stakes in what the WNBA becomes over the next decade are gonna make that very clear to whoever in Indiana thinks this ends well for them. The story isn't over. It's not even close to over. What's been set in motion over these past few weeks is still moving, still building, and every new voice that gets added to this require makes the orchestration more visible rather than less. The blueprint is out in the open now for anyone willing to look at it honestly, and Caitlin Clark, who has never needed anyone to fight her battles, who has never needed a manufactured narrative to justify her presence anywhere she's ever competed, is still right there in the middle of all of it, doing exactly what she's always done, leaving people with no choice but to pay attention.
Lexi Hull, at the end of the game on Indianapolis radio, she spilled the beans. She said, that play didn't go exactly as planned. Wait, what do you mean? Caitlin Clark had a wide open three. Wait, getting her wide open to win the game wasn't exactly as planned? Stephanie White's reaction after Caitlin Clark hit the game-winning shot. Reaction of a coach said, that didn't really go exactly as planned.
Picture this. The final buzzer hasn't even finished echoing, and Caitlin Clark just drained a cold-blooded three-pointer to hand the Connecticut Sun a loss they weren't ready for. You'd expect the entire Indiana Fever sideline to be losing their minds. But Stephanie White? She's standing there with the same energy you'd have watching your food get carried to somebody else's table. Stone cold. No fist pump, no fire, no nothing. And that reaction alone, before any of the details even came out, was already telling a story. Because here's where it gets real. After the game, Lexi Hull went on Indianapolis radio and casually dropped something that had people hitting rewind. She basically told the hosts that the final possession didn't play out the way the team had drawn it up in that huddle. Not a minor tweak, not a slight adjustment. She made it sound like what actually unfolded on the court and what was supposed to happen were two completely separate things. And when a player admits that publicly, you have to stop and ask why. Now sit with that for a second. If the designed play wasn't built around getting Caitlin Clark, one of the most lethal shooters in this league right now, a player defenses literally game planned specifically to contain, a clean, wide-open look from three to ice the game, then what was the actual call? Because from every angle, that's exactly what went down. Clark got the ball in space, caught clean, elevated, and buried it without a second thought. It looked like a play drawn up for her, but apparently it wasn't. That's what makes Stephanie White's blank stare suddenly start making a whole lot of sense. That wasn't a coach being composed under pressure. That was a coach standing there realizing her players had just gone completely off script during the highest stakes possession of the entire game. And somehow, inexplicably, it worked. The designed action got scrapped in real time, and by everything we're piecing together now, Sophie Cunningham and Caitlin Clark made a decision entirely on their own, trusted the moment, and just ran with it. No timeout called, no audible from the sideline, just instinct. And the ball went through the net.
We got the inbound from Sophie to Caitlin Clark. Now, many people are thinking this is supposed to be right here. Give it to Kelsey Mitchell right here. She's gonna get it going downhill. Tries to get a nice pull-up midi or taking it all the way to the rack. However, this misdirection on the backside, Sonia Citron and Cody McMahon, they miscommunicate. They get lost in assignment. They're supposed to switch and they don't switch. So one goes with Lexi Hull.
The play that closed out that game? It didn't come from Stephanie White's clipboard. It came from Austin Kelly, the assistant coach who's quietly been the architect behind Indiana's entire out-of-bounds operation this season. This is the same guy who designed the play that got Caitlin Clark a game-tying three against Washington. Same guy who drew up the Aaliyah Boston mid-range look that didn't fall. And on this night, against Connecticut, he was the one with the marker in his hand when the Fever circled up for that final huddle. The play was built around Kelsey Mitchell as the primary option. She was supposed to use an Aaliyah Boston screen, catch it on the move, and attack downhill toward the rim. That's where the play's first gear lived. On the backside, Kelly layered in some misdirection, Lexi Hull setting a back screen, with Caitlin Clark theoretically peeling off that action as a secondary read if the defense locked up Mitchell. That's smart design. Give the defense two things to handle and let the cracks reveal themselves. But Connecticut's Sonia Citron and JC Sheldon didn't just let a crack form. They basically knocked the whole wall down. Their assignment on that back screen was a switch. One player stays on Lexi Hull, the other stays glued to Caitlin Clark. Simple, fundamental, the kind of coverage you rep until it's automatic. Except both of them followed Lexi Hull at the same time, in the same direction, leaving Caitlin Clark, the player that opposing coaches lose sleep over, the one defenses literally restructure their entire scheme just to account for, standing completely wide open at the three-point line with the clock bleeding out. That's not just a lapse in communication, that's a full-on defensive meltdown at the worst possible moment. You cannot, under any circumstances, lose track of Caitlin Clark in a late-game situation. She doesn't need much. She doesn't need long. Give her a sliver of daylight, and she will make you regret it before your feet even leave the ground. Two defenders, one critical possession, both made the exact same wrong read simultaneously. And on the other end of that mistake was someone who's been waiting her whole career for exactly that kind of moment. Caitlin Clark didn't blink, didn't hesitate, didn't even flinch. The ball was leaving her hands before the defense even had a chance to realize what went wrong.
Then we have Millie. I'm Millie Rock on any block. Then we have Millie. The first thing that shows that play wasn't for Caitlin is AB screening to free Mitchell. The second thing is the pin down isn't set for Cece. A lot of serendipity. Sophie made a clutch read and react play, and Cece is clutch as F. Now, if you look at the comments on this, many people are disagreeing.
So the online discourse around this play started heating up fast, and right in the middle of it was somebody going by Coach Anderson. And honestly, nobody seems entirely sure who this person even is, but they stepped into the conversation with what they framed as the definitive breakdown of what went down. According to Coach Anderson, the official explanation is pretty straightforward. Kelsey Mitchell was the first read, Caitlin Clark was the second read, and Sophie Cunningham made the call to skip past Mitchell entirely because the defender guarding the inbounder was positioning herself to take that passing lane completely out of the equation. That's why the pass to Caitlin came in a little late. Sophie had to make the adjustment in real time. Clean explanation. Makes sense on the surface. Case closed, right? Not even close, because Millie, who's been putting out some of the sharper tactical breakdowns on this team all season, came right back with a counter that's hard to just wave off. The argument was essentially this. Two separate pieces of this play's structure tell you it was never built with Caitlin Clark as the actual target. First, you've got Aaliyah Boston running a screen specifically to free up Kelsey Mitchell. That's not incidental, that's the play's engine. The whole first gear of this action is designed to manufacture a clean catch for Mitchell coming downhill. You don't draw that up if your real intention is to get the ball to someone on the backside. Second, and this is the part that really makes you lean in, the pin-down screen on the backside wasn't even being executed in a way that was going to create a clean look for Clark. It wasn't set with precision. It wasn't timed to optimize her catch. The alignment of the whole action suggests Clark's movement was more of an afterthought built into the design rather than a primary weapon being deliberately unleashed. Millie's overall read on the situation was that Sophie Cunningham deserves enormous credit for making an elite instinctual decision under pressure, and that Caitlin Clark's ability to perform in high-leverage moments is something you simply cannot overlook or understate. It wasn't scheme. It wasn't a master plan unfolding exactly as Austin Kelly drew it up. It was a player making a split-second read and trusting the most dangerous shooter on the floor to finish the job. And Caitlin Clark, for her part, did exactly what anyone paying attention this season already knew she would do. She caught it, squared up, and sent the ball through the net without a single moment of hesitation. But here's where the fan base conversation gets genuinely interesting, because the comment sections under every one of these breakdowns look like a divided community that can't even agree on what they just watched. One half of the Fever fan base is fully convinced this was a deliberate misdirection scheme from the start, that the Mitchell action was always the bait, and that getting Clark open on the backside was the real intended outcome all along. In this version of the story, Austin Kelly is a genius playing chess while Connecticut's defense was playing checkers, and everything unfolded exactly according to plan. The other half is just as convinced that Kelsey Mitchell was legitimately supposed to get that ball, that Sophie Cunningham went completely off script when she saw the passing lane close, and that what looked like a brilliant designed play was actually one player's improvised decision colliding with another player's ice-cold execution. And the reason this debate isn't resolving itself is because, depending on which coaching source you believe and which part of the film you're looking at, both takes have something to stand on. What both sides do agree on, even if they won't admit it in the same breath, is that without Caitlin Clark on the other end of that pass, none of this matters. The debate only exists because she made it. The story only has a dramatic ending because she was standing in that exact spot, at that exact moment, completely ready.
Plan. I'm just putting 2 and 2 together. If people are saying, all right, well, this should have gone to Kelsey, but it went to Caitlin Clark instead, and then Lexi Hull is coming out and confirming, well, that wasn't exactly what was drawn up.
Here's where everything starts to lock into place, and it all circles back to what Lexi Hull said on that radio show after the game. Because that interview isn't just a casual post-game soundbite anymore. In context with everything else we've been breaking down, it becomes the piece of evidence that kind of ties the whole thing together. Think about the logic here. If this play went exactly as Austin Kelly drew it up, if the entire design was always pointing toward getting Caitlin Clark a wide-open three-pointer at the final buzzer, then why on earth would Lexi Hull get on Indianapolis radio and tell the hosts that it didn't go exactly according to plan? That's not how players talk about plays that worked the way they were supposed to. When something goes right and the result matches the intention, players come out and say exactly that. They credit the coaching staff. They talk about the execution. They celebrate the design. Lexi didn't do any of that. She specifically chose language that created distance between what happened on the floor and what was supposed to happen in that huddle. And here's the thing. She wasn't talking about sloppy execution. She wasn't saying the timing was a half-second off, or that somebody's footwork wasn't clean coming off the screen, or that the spacing could have been tighter. Those are the kinds of technical complaints you hear when a play works, but not perfectly. What Lexi said was fundamentally different. She was speaking to the structure of the possession itself, the bones of what was drawn up versus what actually played out. That's a much bigger admission than people initially gave it credit for. She essentially confirmed, without making it a headline, that the final product the viewing audience watched was not the play that was designed. So let's reason through this the way it deserves to be reasoned through. If we take Lexi's words seriously, and there's no real reason not to because she has zero motivation to lie about something this specific, and we layer that on top of everything the film is already showing us about how this play was structured, then one conclusion keeps rising to the top. Kelsey Mitchell was the actual intended recipient of that inbound pass. The play was built to get her the ball in motion, coming off Aaliyah Boston's screen, so she could attack the rim going downhill with pace and force the defense to make a decision. Either she scores at the rim, or Connecticut collapses and she finds an open teammate on the kickout. That's the play. That's what Austin Kelly put on that whiteboard. But Sophie Cunningham looked at what was developing in front of her in real time, and this is the part that deserves genuine recognition. And she processed the situation faster than the defense even realized what was happening. Sonia Citron and JC Sheldon had already committed their mistake. They were both chasing Lexi Hull, leaving Caitlin Clark in open space with no one assigned to her. And Sophie caught all of that before the play had even fully developed. She made a decision that wasn't in the playbook. She bypassed the designed primary action entirely, ignored the drawn-up first read, and put the ball in the hands of Caitlin Clark. Now, let's be clear about what that decision actually represents, because it's easy to gloss over it in the excitement of the moment. Sophie Cunningham, in the final seconds of a game with everything on the line, chose to override the coaching staff's call in real time. That's not a small thing. That's an audible at the highest stakes moment of the night, made entirely on instinct and court vision. And it worked. Not because of luck, not because of chaos, but because Sophie read the defense perfectly and trusted the one player on the floor who was built for that exact moment. Caitlin Clark, for her part, didn't need a second invitation. She didn't need the play to be drawn up for her. She didn't need the design to center around her. She just needed the ball, a fraction of open space, and a clock that still had a little life left in it. Sophie gave her all three, and Caitlin did the rest. Catching clean, rising without hesitation, and splashing a three-pointer that the Connecticut Sun will probably be thinking about for a long time. The plan changed. The result didn't. And that's the most Caitlin Clark thing that's happened all season.
Look at Stephanie White's reaction after the shot goes in. And by reaction, I mean lack of reaction. Now, many people are saying, oh, well, this is because that's her on the bottom of the screen. Well, that's because there's a lot of time.
Let's talk about Stephanie White's body language in that moment, because what her face did, or more accurately, what it didn't do after that shot dropped through the net, is something you genuinely cannot explain away with coaching composure or professionalism or any of the usual excuses people reach. 4. The shot goes in. Indiana wins the game. The arena is going absolutely insane. Fans are on their feet. Players are rushing the floor. The energy in that building is the kind that stays with you for weeks. And Stephanie White is standing on the sideline with her arms hanging at her sides, her face completely flat, looking like someone who just watched something happen that she's still trying to process. Not the controlled stillness of a veteran coach keeping her composure in a big moment. Something else. Something that reads more like surprise mixed with complicated feelings that she couldn't quite get to her face in time to mask. And here's the exercise that really exposes everything. Just run it back in your head with a different player making that shot. Picture, Kelsey Mitchell catches that inbound, attacks downhill exactly like the play was drawn up, and either finishes at the rim or, in some alternate version, pulls up and hits a mid-ranger to win it. You genuinely believe Stephanie White stands there with that same empty expression? Come on, she's sprinting down the sideline. She's grabbing the nearest assistant coach by the collar. She's losing her composure in the best possible way because her designed play, her primary option, her system, it all just worked exactly the way she and Austin Kelly drew it up in that huddle. The celebration would have been immediate, instinctive, and completely uncontrollable. Coaches don't hold that back when things go according to plan. That's the whole point of having a plan, so that when it executes, you feel it in your chest. But Caitlin Clark hit it instead, through a blown defensive coverage, off a pass that Sophie Cunningham made by scrapping the designed action entirely, on a possession that, according to Lexi Hull's own post-game admissions, did not unfold the way it was supposed to. And Stephanie White just stood there. The internet, naturally, found humor in it immediately. People joking about the specific kind of face you make when something you didn't authorize somehow works out anyway, and you're too stunned to even be happy about it. Obviously, the more extreme versions of that joke are just people being people online. But underneath the comedy, there's a real and legitimate observation being made. That expression on Stephanie White's face is not what a coach looks like when they're watching their game plan reach its perfect conclusion. That's what a coach looks like when they're recalibrating in real time, accepting an outcome they had no control over, and reminding themselves that a win is still a win, even when it didn't come from the play they called. That alone would be enough to carry this conversation. But then the post-game footage adds another whole layer that people are not letting go of. Watch Caitlin Clark come off that floor. She's locked in with Kelsey Mitchell immediately, and the energy between those two tells you everything. There's a real unspoken communication happening there, a shared acknowledgement between two players who both clearly understand exactly what just went down on that final possession and find genuine joy in it together. The smile Caitlin has in that moment isn't the polished, media-ready expression of someone doing the right thing for the cameras. It's the real one, the kind that comes from the gut when something works out in the most unexpected, chaotic, and ultimately perfect way possible. And then Caitlin walks right past Stephanie White. No extended embrace, no warm exchange, no moment of coach and player basking in something they built together. Whatever interaction does happen between the two of them reads as obligatory at best. The kind of acknowledgement you extend because the situation requires it, not because there's genuine warmth powering it. It's brief, it's surface level, and it's a striking contrast to the authentic joy Caitlin was clearly feeling just seconds earlier with her teammate. It says something about where that relationship currently lives. And when you stack it on top of the blank stare, on top of Lexi Hull's radio comments, on top of everything we've been pulling apart in this breakdown, the picture it paints becomes increasingly difficult to dismiss as coincidence or just a bad camera angle caught at the wrong moment.
When you just lost money on a bet, you fixed. Hate to see it. Now, folks, take a look at this interaction between the two. Caitlin Clark makes a shot. She's coming to walk off the court. Hits Cody McMahon with the tray. Can't see me, Cody McMahon. They go back to college.
And Stephanie White wasn't the only one on that sideline who couldn't find a single ounce of celebration energy when that shot dropped. Because once you know what you're looking for, you start scanning the rest of the bench. And that's when you find Cheryl Miller. All the way to the right side of the frame, standing there while everyone around her is reacting to one of the most electric moments of the Fever's season. And Cheryl Miller's face? Completely still. Not a flicker of excitement, not a fist pump, not even a delayed reaction that catches up a second or two late, the way it sometimes does when the emotion takes a moment to hit. Nothing. Just this flat, unreadable expression that looks completely disconnected from the environment she's physically standing in. An environment where a game-winning three-pointer just went through the net and the building is shaking. Now stop and really sit with how strange that is. We're not talking about a neutral observer in the stands. We're talking about an assistant coach on the Indiana Fever sideline, a member of the coaching staff whose job, whose investment, whose professional reputation is directly tied to what this team does on the floor. One of her players just hit the most important shot of the game in the most important moment of the night and secured a win. That should be automatic. The celebration shouldn't even be a conscious decision at that point. It should just happen, the way it happens for everyone else in that arena who cares about the outcome. But for Cheryl Miller, standing just a few feet from where all of that joy is erupting, there's a complete disconnect. The moment lands and she absorbs it like someone watching a highlight from a game they have no rooting interest in. And the question that follows, the one that's getting harder and harder to avoid as all of these pieces stack up together, is simply, why? Why does an assistant coach on a professional basketball team look like that when her franchise player just won the game? What possible emotional logic produces that reaction in that moment from someone who's supposed to be invested in this team's success? The answer, when you line up everything we've been breaking down across this entire sequence, is starting to feel less like speculation and more like the only explanation that actually fits everything we're seeing. The coaching staff, and this appears to go beyond just Stephanie White, had a vision for how this game was supposed to end. That vision had Kelsey Mitchell at the center of it. The play was designed for her. The primary action was built around her catch and her athleticism attacking the rim. The narrative the staff wanted to walk away with, the story they wanted the post-game to tell, was one where Kelsey Mitchell came through in the biggest moment and proved that this Indiana Fever team has weapons and depth and a winning formula that extends beyond any single player's star power. That's the ending they drew up, literally and figuratively. Caitlin Clark didn't let that happen. Not because she forced anything, not because she demanded the ball, not because she inserted herself into a moment that wasn't hers, but because Sophie Cunningham read the floor and trusted her. Because Sonia Citron and JC Sheldon lost track of her at the worst possible time, and because when that ball arrived in her hands, she did what she has done over and over again at every level she's ever played. She made the shot. She closed the game. She was, once again, the reason the Fever walked off that court with a win. And that, right there, is what those flat expressions are actually communicating. It's not indifference to the win. Nobody in that organization wants to lose. It's something more specific and more uncomfortable than that. It's the look of people who had a plan for how to validate a particular message about their team's identity and watched that plan get dismantled in real time by the one player they were trying hardest not to center the story around. Caitlin Clark took the hero moment. She took the highlight. She took the narrative. And she did it without anyone's permission, in the most unscripted and undeniable way possible, by simply being exactly who she is when it matters most. The frustration written across those faces on the sideline isn't about the outcome of the game. It's about the fact that once again, no matter what the play says, no matter what the design intends, no matter how the staff tries to shape the story around this team, Caitlin Clark finds a way to be the story anyway. What makes all of this so fascinating is that nobody in that organization is going to come out and say any of this directly. That's not how these things work. Stephanie White is going to keep giving the same composed post-game pressers. Cheryl Miller isn't going to sit in front of a camera and explain why her face looked like that. Austin Kelly isn't going to publicly confirm whether Sophie Cunningham went rogue or executed the design. The official version of events has already been established, and everybody with a credential around that team is going to stick to it. But the film doesn't lie. The body language doesn't lie. And Lexi Hull's radio interview, which, let's be honest, was probably just her being genuine without fully thinking through the implications of what she was saying, doesn't lie either. All of these things exist simultaneously, and they all point in the same direction, no matter which angle you approach them from. What this situation really exposes is a tension that's been simmering inside that Fever locker room and that coaching staff for longer than just this one game. There's a version of this team that the front office and coaching staff want to present to the world. A balanced, system-driven, nobody bigger than the team version. And then there's the version that keeps showing up on the actual court, where one player continuously finds herself at the center of the most important moments, whether the design calls for it or not. Those two versions keep colliding, and every time they do, you get exactly what you saw on that sideline. A win that doesn't feel like a win to the people who are supposed to be controlling it. Caitlin Clark is just out here playing basketball, and somehow that keeps being the most complicated thing in the room.